All right, welcome back to another episode of Bear's Guide 205. Today, we are exploring language, moving into the second part of the third unit. We've talked about culture. Well, now let's take a look at a specific part of culture, language, one very close to the identity of many people. Now, today we're going to focus on the origin and diffusion of two language families, the Indo-European language family and the Sino-Tibetan language family, but also just take a look at the ideas of everything involving language trees. So first, before we can dig into anything, we have to understand how languages are classified. All languages are classified into three parts, let's say. We have the language family, the language branch, and the language group. Now, each one of these classifications comes with a reason why it's classified that way, obviously. Families are collections of languages with a common ancestral language ancestor. Basically, all these languages that are tied to a family come from this language that existed before recorded history. Now, branches are languages that do have an ancestor that is a part of recorded history. Like, we know that language, we can study it, maybe we call it a dead language or something like that, but it's still there and it's still written down and we can still reference it. And then finally, groups are the actual languages. These are the ones that we speak, English, German, Spanish, French, Portuguese, all that. And then inside of language groups, and the reason why they're called a group is because they have collections of dialects, right? So let's look at an example. We'll use English. So the family is Indo-European. English is related to all languages that trace their roots back to the Indo-European language, but over time, those people migrated, those people went to different parts of the world, those people saw different things, and they break off and form their own language, Germanic. The Germanic branch breaks off from Indo-European. English is closely related to the other Germanic languages from the Germanic branch, but eventually people who speak that language from the Germanic branch migrate, move around the world, encounter new things, change over time, and they make their own language, English, and that's where we're at right now. And then, of course, we have the dialects of English where we have like American English and all the different dialects of American English, and then we have like English, the proper English and all that. So that's just a quick breakdown on how we do languages. But if that wasn't enough for you, let's look at the metaphor of the language tree. So we know that we have language families, branches, and groups, so we're going to do the same thing, right? The family is the trunk, it's what they're all related to. The branches are the language branches, and then the leaves are the group. And if you look at the picture, the leaves that are bigger obviously have more speakers than the leaves that are not. But we also see that there's multiple families and that somehow families below that line have a even further back recorded ancestor. And we're going to talk about that too. So, fun fact about English and that we got to get through, that English is relatively sort of closely related to the Romance language branch. They're kind of cousins. At one point, England was conquered by French-speaking Normans, so it's not France yet, and the Normans are speaking this like early French language, but it mixes with the Germanic language, and that's how we have like French-sounding words in the English language, and it's also why we have words that kind of are in common with Spanish and Italian, so on and so forth, but we'll talk more about that. So, what we have to know is that Indo European is the largest language family in the world, and it's spoken from India to Europe. But we also know that these languages are spoken all around the world, which we'll get into later why. But needless to say, you have to know that the Indo European language family is the largest language family in the world. So, you have to know the four largest branches and their location of the Indo European language. You don't have to know all eight, but you got to know four. And it's really interesting to think that the languages Hindi, Spanish, English, and Russian, and there are branches that are attached to them, Indo Iranian, Romance, Germanic, Balto Slavic. But at the end of the day, these languages are spoken in very different parts of the world. And we would never say that these four languages have some type of pre recorded ancestor at one point. But that's the point of language, and that's how powerful it can be. And the reason why we look into this is because the cultural ties to it, or the cultural ties that people share. Now, the Indo-European family, it is the largest language family because of colonialism, right? This is a topic I talk about a lot. We're going to talk about it forever. You know what I mean? Colonialism had such a huge impact on the world that all around the world today, people speak these Indo-European languages. And if we break it down on a pie chart, we know that half of the world speaks some type of Indo-European language because of colonialism, because of imperialism. But we know that Sino-Tibetan is the second largest language family in the world because of Mandarin Chinese. Look, Mandarin Chinese is the largest language group in the world. So Indo-European is the largest language family. Mandarin Chinese is the largest language group. It is incredibly important that you know how to can differentiate those two things. So where the heck does it come from? You know, we talk about this ancestor, this pre-recorded ancestor, and how did we get here? So there's two main theories on the roots of the Indo-European family. We have the Kurgan-Her theory and the Anatolian-Her theory. Now, the Kurgan-Her theory is that this language originated in Central Asia between Russia and Kazakhstan, and it spreads outward as a result of military conquest. Basically, people going around, murdering, killing, and forcing people to speak that language. Whereas the Anatolian-Her theory, it originated from modern-day Turkey, and it spread outwards along agricultural practices, right? So just through trade of agricultural goods in the Fertile Crescent, which, makes sense. And we know that all these languages have some type of common ancestor because we share words in between all of our languages that show that at one point in time, the humans that we originate from had a set of words, a language that they used. And then over time, as those people migrated to other parts of the planet and they ran into other things they haven't identified with language, so they come up with words for it, that's when we know that they separated. They separated into the different branches and eventually the different groups. But we know we have a core set of words or phrases or cognates that can go back to, this Indo-European language. So we have this picture of how we can look at it, the Kurgan-Her theory. And guys, to make sure that you don't forget it, remember, Kurgan, K stands for killing. Boom. Now you can remember that one and how it spread this, right? Where Anatolian-Her theory, A stands for agriculture, and it came out of the Fertile Crescent, and then people are going to trade agriculture. So now you can never forget it. Remember, K for killing, K, Kurgan, killing, A, agriculture, Anatolian. Now we got to know stuff about the Romance language branch of the Indo-European family. I know it's a lot today, but we're going to get through it. The Romance language branch is named because it's based off the Romans, not like romantically, and they all spoke Latin. When Rome conquers much of Europe, they bring their language with them, but eventually Rome falls, and there's the people of Europe are isolated from each other, and over time they take that Latin that they were speaking, this very rudimentary form of Latin, they mix it with their culture, and that's how we get French and Italian and Spanish and Portuguese and Romansh. Yeah, these languages that I just mentioned. And what intervening obstacle, going back to, chapter 3, or migration, keeps them isolated from each other to make these own languages, and they're mountains. You know what I mean? So you have these mountains in the way or just other countries in the way, and eventually people form their own languages over time. So what do you need to know today? Okay, this was a whole bunch. This was a long lesson. So understand the difference between language families, branches, and groups. I would know how to use that family tree, and I would understand kind of the thinking behind how we categorize them. Understand why the Indo-European language family is the largest in the world and everything that comes with it. And know the two theories of the origin of the Indo-European language family. As always, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you know when new videos are released so you can stay up to date. As always, this is Bear's Guide to a 5, and we'll see you next time.